Hey everyone, it's Miguel here. I just want to do a quick, well, it might not be quick, I don't know, depending how long it takes me to go through this, but I wanted to actually answer or expound on the question of free will, and specifically regarding to um, in Exodus, did Pharaoh have free will? And if he did or he didn't, that affects you know what we believe in free will. So let's dig into it. The paragraph that was given was, or the paragraphs that were given in question were of Exodus, um, in Exodus chapter 7. So let's go there real quickly. See if I can navigate to that. All right. Hopefully you guys can see this. So if you go to chapter 7, let's go there real quick. This is the New King James Version. Exodus 7. So the Lord said to Moses, "See, I have made you as God to Pharaoh, and Aaron your brother shall be your prophet. You shall speak all that I command to you, and Aaron your brother shall tell Pharaoh to send the children of Israel out of his land. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart and multiply my signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt. But Pharaoh will not heed you, so that I may lay my hand on Egypt and bring my armies and my people, the children of Israel, out of the land of Egypt by great judgments. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I stretch out my hand on Egypt and bring out the children of Israel among them." Then Moses and Aaron did so, just as the Lord commanded them. So they did. And Moses was 80 years old, and Aaron 83 years old when they spoke to Pharaoh. So this is kind of the verse that was shown as a proof text of, see, we don't have any free will. God hardened Pharaoh's heart. So, if we just take these two paragraphs here, I'm like, it's easy to come to that conclusion. But we have to read in context of the whole story of Exodus, right? Or at least pertaining to, the part where they're leaving Egypt, and that whole back and forth between Moses, Aaron, and Pharaoh, and God, obviously, right? So there's a conversation going on here. And that's why I wanted to go to chapter 4, just to get some context here. And if we go to, starting at verse 6, let's go there. So furthermore, the Lord said to him, "Now put your hand in your bosom." Actually, you know what? Let's go start at the beginning. How about that? Then Moses answered and said, "But suppose they will not believe me or listen to my voice. Suppose they say the Lord has not appeared to you." This is in context even more of he's asking them to go to the Israelites and tell them, what he's about to do. So the Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand?" He said, "A rod." And he said, "Cast it on the ground." So he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses fled from it. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Reach out your hand and take it by the tail." And he reached out his hand and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand, that they may believe that the Lord God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. Furthermore, the Lord said to him, "Now put your hand on your bosom." And he put his hand in his bosom. And when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous, like snow. And he said, "Put your hand in your bosom again." So he put his hand in his bosom again. and drew it out of his bosom. And behold, it was restored like his other flesh. Then it will be, if they do not believe you, nor heed the message of the first sign, that they may believe the message of the latter sign. And it shall be, if they do not believe even these two signs, or listen to your voice, that you shall take water from the river and pour it on the dry land. The water which you take from the river will become blood on the dry land. Then Moses said to the Lord, "Oh, my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither before nor since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue." So the Lord said to him, "Who has made man's mouth, or who makes the mute, the deaf, the seeing, or the blind? Have not I the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall say." But he said, "Oh, my Lord, please send by the hand of whomever else you may send." So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, "Is not Aaron the Levite your brother? I know that he can speak well, and look, he is also coming out to meet you. When he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. Now you shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and I will teach you what you shall do. So he shall be your spokesman to the people, and he himself shall be as a mouth for you, and you shall be to him as God, and you shall take his rod in your hand, with which you shall do the signs." All right, so it's a lot there, but I wanted to give some context here because um he's telling God is telling Moses, go do this. And you see the interaction back and forth here, right? God is trying to convince Moses to go and do this, to go tell the Hebrews, get them ready, because he's about to go after that to go to talk to Pharaoh, right? To let Israel, Moses and his people go, right? Just as the first verses here talk about. But that being said, all right, if God has to convince someone, that in itself is telling us, there's some free will there. There's an inference of free will. If I have total control and of a being that does not have free will, I don't have to convince them. I just have to tell them, go, and they will go. Right? So let's keep going here, because actually the verses I really wanted to emphasize in this section here are, let's see here, share my screen again. So if you go to, I believe, starting in 8. Yeah. So remember, he talked about 2 signs. So at 7, and he said, "Put your hand in your bosom again." And he put his hand in his bosom again. So this is the second sign that he had him to do. This is kind of like a pre-briefing before he goes out and talks to the Israelites, right? He's kind of getting them ready to, what he's going to do. But this is interesting. God says, "Then it will be, if they do not believe you, nor heed the message of the first sign, that they may believe the message of the latter sign." So it's like option A. They believe that one, great, move forward. But if they don't believe that one, hopefully they'll believe the second sign. And even in you see in verse 7, and it shall be, if they do not believe even these two signs or listen to your voice, that you shall take water from the river and pour it on the dry land. The water which you take from the river will become blood on the dry land. So it's like he's giving them a third sign that this is just the Pharaoh isn't even in the picture yet. This is him prepping Moses to convince the Israelites to believe in what he's about to do, right? So these are signs for the Israelites, not Pharaoh. And he's giving them like this whole thing, like, all right, try this sign. If they don't believe, go this sign. If they don't believe that one, here's another one. All right. So that's pretty interesting. Just wanted to see, you guys to see that because it's a conversation going on. It's not a commandment or a pre-programmed thing going on here, right? All right, so if we go now, fast forward to chapter um, chapter 5. Yeah, chapter 5. So in chapter 5, finally, they go on to speak with Pharaoh. This is the first encounter with Pharaoh, right? So they had already spoken to the Israelites, and they tell Pharaoh, thus says the Lord God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold the feast to me in the wilderness. And Pharaoh said, who is the Lord, that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, nor will I let Israel go. So that's a big statement right there from Pharaoh. He doesn't know the Lord. So why should he obey him? Once again, it's insinuating at least Pharaoh thinks he's got free will here, right? I mean, so far we see free will. So they have these conversations, obviously back and forth. There are some signs that are given. I believe, I don't know if that's here yet. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to, it's a lot to go through here. Okay. All right. All right. And so I'm trying to catch up on my notes here and match them up so you can see what we're talking about. All right. So let's go to 20 because I have that highlighted. Then as they came out from Pharaoh, they met with Moses and Aaron, who stood there to meet them. They said to them, let the Lord look on you and judge. This is the Israelites talking to Moses and Aaron because they just came out of the meeting with Pharaoh, right? And what did Pharaoh do? Instead of heeding the warning from the words of God, he increased their labor, right? He's like, oh, you guys must have nothing better else to do if you think you have time to go out and worship, your God. So he increased their labor, right? So anyways, because you have made us abhorrent in the sight of Pharaoh and in the sight of his servants to put a sword in their hand to kill us. So it's interesting because the Israelites are equating, right, what Aaron and Moses talked about on behalf of God to Pharaoh. He says that caused that Pharaoh to now hate us even more, and they're going to want to kill us, right? I mean, that might be exaggerated, but at least they're thinking, the persuasion here happened from Moses and Aaron, right? All right, let's keep going. Going a little faster now. Um, all right. So, we keep on going here. Moses still does not want to move forward. If you go to we're in chapter 6, right? It begins with the Lord said to Moses, now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh, for with a strong hand um, he will let them go, and with a strong hand he will drive them out of this land. So, it keeps going. He's complaining. He's like, oh, down here. Moses spoke before the Lord, saying, the children of Israel have not heeded me. How then shall Pharaoh heed me? For I am of uncircumcised lips. Some translators think it's, he had a speech impediment. Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron and gave them a command for the children of Israel and for Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. All right, and this is just a little genealogy of where Moses and Aaron came from, their brothers. All right. And let's keep going here. All right, so let's go to my notes. Go on to the next one. All right, so let's go to the first. Now let's go to chapter 7. This is where, that paragraph that I shared in the beginning, this is almost like a summary, right? Like a little beginning preface or whatever, right? Or what's about to happen. But let's see, how does God end up hardening Pharaoh's heart? If this is what, the preface or the summary, how does God end up doing that? So we're going to skip around here a little bit so we can go faster. All right. So first, Aaron's miraculous rod. Remember, in this first part, then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when Pharaoh speaks to you, saying, show a miracle for yourselves, then you shall say to Aaron, take your rod and cast it before Pharaoh, and let it become a serpent. So Moses and Aaron went into Pharaoh, and they did so, just as the Lord commanded. And Aaron cast down his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent. All right, wow, that's crazy. I will see that, I would freak out. But Pharaoh also called the wise men and the sorcerers, so the magicians of Egypt, they also did in like manner in their enchantments. For every man threw down his rod, and they became serpents. But Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods. And Pharaoh's heart grew hard, and he did not heed them as the Lord had said. Notice what that last sentence there. Pharaoh's heart grew hard. After observing all this, doesn't say God hardened his heart. It said Pharaoh's heart grew hard. So this is something that he's doing, that it's going on. It's an observation. Now, let's keep moving along here. That's not even the first plague. That was just like the introduction with Pharaoh. So the first plague was basically, water being turned to blood. And we keep going here. Let's go to the last paragraph. So basically, the magicians did the same thing that Moses did, and they turned the water to blood as well. So let's read, starting at 22. Then the magicians of Egypt did so with their enchantments. meaning turning water to blood as well. And Pharaoh's heart grew hard, and he did not heed them, as the Lord had said. Oh, wow, that's interesting. So he's acquitting it. The Lord said that his heart would grow hard. Right? Okay. And Pharaoh turned and went into his house. Neither was his heart moved by this. Wow, that's interesting. So I want to read that again. And Pharaoh turned and went into his house. Neither was his heart moved by this. So there's a persuasion statement here, right? Pharaoh, people are trying to persuade Pharaoh to move his heart. But in this instance, his heart was not moved. So all the Egyptians dug around the river for water to drink, because at this point, the river was all blood. So they couldn't drink that, because they could not drink the water of the river. And 7 days passed after the Lord had struck the river. All right, let's keep moving along here. Let's go to 8. This is one that's a little interesting. All right. All right, let's go to 8 is the plague of frogs, right? Plague of frogs. So let's go to verse 6 really quickly. So Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt. And the magicians did so with their enchantments. So, sorry, I got distracted there. I got a phone message. Let me turn that off, guys. Sorry. That's what happens when you're doing this on the fly. All right, so Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt. And the magicians did so with their enchantments and brought up the frogs on the land of Egypt. So magicians did the same thing. And Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, "Entreat the Lord that he may take away the frogs from me and from my people, and I will let the people go, and they may sacrifice to the Lord." And Moses said to Pharaoh, "Accept the honor of saying, when I shall intercede for you, for your servants and your people, to destroy the frogs from you and your houses, that they may remain in the river only." So he said, "Tomorrow." And he said, "Let it be according to your word, that you may now know that there is no one like your God, or our God, the Lord our God. And the frogs shall depart from you and from your houses, from your servants, from your people. They shall remain in the river only." Interesting. Now let's read this last paragraph here. Then Moses and Aaron went out from Pharaoh. Moses cried out to the Lord concerning the frogs, which he had brought against Pharaoh. So the Lord did according to the word of Moses, and the frogs died out of the houses, out of the courtyards, and out of the fields. They gathered them together in heaps, and the land stank. I love those details. But when Pharaoh saw that there was relief, he hardened his heart. Notice that. That's very specific. He hardened his heart and did not heed them, as the Lord had said. That's already second plague, and he's hardened his own heart. I think what, 3 times already? All right. So let's go to 3 or 2 times. Let's go to the third plague. Third plague, this is interesting. I'm going to read this whole thing. So the Lord said to Moses, "Say to Aaron, stretch out your rod and strike the dust of the land, so that it may become lice throughout the land of Egypt." And they did so, for Aaron stretched out his hand with his rod and struck the dust of the earth. And it became lice on man and beast. All the dust of the land became lice throughout the land of Egypt. Now, the magicians so worked with their enchantments to bring forth lice, but they could not. So there were lice of man and beast. Then the magician said to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." But Pharaoh's heart grew hard, and he did not heed them, just as the Lord had said. Once again, another instance that Pharaoh is hardening his own heart. All right, let's go to the fourth plague. All right. And this is interesting because he, at this part, in the fourth plague, this is about flies, right? So the plague was about flies coming into the land, and then Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron and said, "Go sacrifice to your God in the land." So he's trying to compromise with them, make them compromise, right? So the Lord said, I want to be specific here. The Lord said that the Israelites have to go out 3 days journey and go sacrifice to the Lord, right? Go serve the Lord, whatever that looked like. But Pharaoh is trying to make them compromise, right? Like, oh, do it in the land, in our land, basically. And I love that, Moses doesn't take the bait. He understands that the Lord wants something specific, right? And Moses said, "Isn't that right to do so? For we would be sacrificing the abomination of the Egyptians to the Lord our God. If we sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians before their eyes, then will they not stone us? We will go a 3 days journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God, as he will command us." So his case is also, if we do this in front of the Egyptians, they're going to hate us and they're going to want to stone us to death because they will consider us an abomination. Remember, the Egyptians served a whole bunch of the different gods, and part of the plagues is the bigger story is that each plague is almost in response to the major gods that they served, the Egyptians. All right, so he's still trying to compromise here. So let's go to the end here. So Moses went out from Pharaoh and entreated the Lord, and the Lord did according to the word of Moses. He removed the swarms of flies from Pharaoh, from his servants, and from his people. Not one remained, but Pharaoh hardened his heart at this time also. Neither would he let the people go. One more time, it's, man, we're in the fourth plague, and he's already hardened his heart so many times on his own accord. All right, so let's go to the next chapter here. And this is chapter 9. This is the fifth plague. Its livestock is diseased, right? It's a plague on the livestock. So the Lord did this thing on the next day, and all the livestock, I'm reading from 6, of Egypt died. but the livestock of the children of Israel did not one died. I mean, that's a miracle. Even there's a division, right, of the ownership of livestock. That's amazing, right? And Pharaoh sent, and indeed, not even one of the livestock of the Israelites was dead. But the heart of Pharaoh became hard. Notice this. It's almost like a progression, right? It's like the wording is a little bit more, uh, I don't know if you see it, but it became hard. It's almost like, man, this is it. This is the point where there's no more hardness to be had, right? But that's it. And he did not let the people go. So now, sixth plague. This is where things change a little bit. And we're going to notice here as we go. The sixth plague, boils. So there are boils on the people. And let's see. Then they took ashes from the furnace and stood before, I'm reading from 10, before Pharaoh and Moses, scattered them toward heaven, and they caused boils that break out in sores on man and beast. So this is boils, another plague that's going to go not just on men, but also on animals. And see here. And the magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils. For the boils were on the magicians and all the Egyptians. So even the magicians got boils on them. So they're obviously not doing anything to replicate this at all. I think they've stopped at this point. But the Lord hardened. Now, listen to this. This is where the shift happens. But the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he did not heed them, just as the Lord had spoken to Moses. So at this point, now it's like, remember the last time that Pharaoh's heart, it became hard. It's almost like to a completion. And then now God is like, it was almost like a point of no return, and that's happened. I've seen that happen to people where, man, their circumstances, or they're holding on to their, selfishness or whatever it is, right? And they harden their hearts. They they don't want to let go of whatever it is that is a poison to them, right? People in addiction, um, addiction, most of it is psychological, emotional, spiritual, and there's a big component of physical addiction as well. But from knowing and knowing people that have gone through this, hearing the stories, most addiction, and my own, because I was addicted to cigarettes, those type of substances, and alcohol at one point. So I know that there is a physical draw, but the part which really gets the addict is the spiritual and the psychological, the mind, the will of the person not wanting to let go, because they love their addiction so much, even though they see how destructive it is. It's almost as a comfort to them, not to the unknown, or to face the accountability, right? And so I think now this is switched, and in Romans, and I'm sorry because I don't forget top of my head, it talks about God giving people over to a debased mind. It's basically saying, okay, there's a point where a person is not going to change anymore. They've made up their mind. So like, okay, the Lord's like, okay, I'm just going to let you have at it. You go ahead. I'm not going to force your hand to love me. That's not love. If I have to force you or pre-program you to love, that's not love. Love takes free will. Just as God loved the world so much, he gave his own son. He gave as a gift. That was free will. So let's continue here. Share the screen again. So yeah, like I said, this is a point where it shifts, right? It shifts to the Lord is the one who's hardening the heart at this point. This is the sixth plague. Now we're going to the seventh plague, and there's something interesting here for Moses. Okay, yeah, let's go to. So the seventh plague is hail, and this is not no ordinary hail that we've seen. This is like, thunder, fire, big hailstorm, like huge boulders. It lands on people, and it's going to destroy them. I want to, I'm going to read this, and it's to show God's mercy. Even in his judgment, he's showing his mercy. Then the Lord said to Moses, rise early in the morning and stand before Pharaoh and say to him, thus says the Lord, God of the Hebrews, let my people go that they may serve me. For at this time I will send all my plagues to your very heart and on your servants and on your people, that you may know that there is none like me in all the earth. Now, if I had stretched out my hand and struck you and your people with pestilence, then you would have been cut off from the earth. Notice what he just said. He said he could have wiped them out a long time ago. But indeed, for this purpose, I have raised you up, that I may show my power in you, and that my name may be declared in all the earth. So even though the evil that you have done, and you deserve these judgments, I'm going to use your evil for my purpose, for the good of humanity, because they're going to see who I am. They're going to see my power in you, and that my name may be declared in all the earth. And here's where the mercy comes in, right? As yet you exalt yourself against my people, and that you will not let them go. Behold, tomorrow about this time, I will cause very heavy hail to rain down, such as none has been seen in Egypt since the founding until now. Therefore, send now and gather. This is the mercy here. Within the judgment, he says, send now and gather your livestock and all you have in the field, for the hail shall come down on every man and every animal which is found on the field and is not brought home, and they shall die. He's telling them ahead of time, look, gather all your people, gather all your livestock, and bring them to your houses away from the field, because this is where it's going to happen. That's mercy. He who feared the word of the Lord among the servants of Pharaoh made his servants and his livestock flee to the houses. But he who did not regard the word of the Lord left his servants and his livestock in the field. Man. So it happened. And people died because they didn't heed the word of the Lord. And then we skip down to 27. And Pharaoh sent and called for Moses and Aaron and said to them, I have sinned this time. The Lord is righteous, and my people and I are wicked. Entreat the Lord that there may be no more mighty thundering and hail, for it is enough. I will let you go, and you shall stay no longer. So Moses said to him, as soon as I have gone out of the city, interesting, he's in the city, he's not being affected. I will spread out my hands to the Lord. The thunder will cease, and there will be no more hail, that you may know that the earth is the Lord's. But as for you and your servants, I know that you will not yet fear the Lord. Now the flax and the barley were struck, for the barley was in the head and the flax was in the bud. But the wheat and the spelt are now struck, for they are late crops. So Moses went out of the city from Pharaoh and spread out his hands to the Lord. And the thunder and the hail ceased, and the rain was not poured on the earth. And when Pharaoh saw that the rain, the hail, and the thunder had ceased, he sinned yet more. I mean, the dude couldn't even wait. And he hardened his heart. Notice we're back to Pharaoh hardening his own heart. So the heart of Pharaoh was hard. Oh, wait, sorry. And he hardened his heart, he and his servants. So now he and his servants have hardened hearts. So the heart of Pharaoh was hard. Neither would he let the children of Israel go, as the Lord has spoken by Moses. All right. You keep going here. Let's see. Let's go to the eighth plague. We're almost there, guys. The eighth plague. Now the Lord said to Moses, go into Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his servants, that I may show these signs of mine before him, and that you may tell in the hearing of your son and your son's son the mighty things I have done in Egypt, and my signs which I have done among them, that you may know that I am the Lord. So the Lord hardened Pharaoh and his servants' hearts at this point now, getting ready for this plague. And this is the locust, right? Let's go to, let's see, verse 3, is it? So Moses and Aaron came in to Pharaoh and said to him, thus says the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, how long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? You know, back to the free will statements here. The Lord is saying to Pharaoh, how long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Why would God ask such a question if there was no free will involved? Let my people go that they may serve me, or else a choice. There's a choice here. If you refuse to let my people go, behold, tomorrow I will bring locusts into your territory. And they shall cover the face of the earth. So that no one will be able to see the earth, and they shall eat the residue of what is left, which remains on you from hail, and they shall eat every tree which grows up for you out of the field. So basically, not to keep reading the whole thing, but the locusts eat everything else that hasn't been destroyed at this point. All right, let's keep going here. So, once again, God starts hardening. This is like a pivoting. God is hardening their hearts at this point. All right, so you go towards the end here. And the Lord And reading verse 19, the Lord turned the very strong west wind and took the locusts away and blew them into the Red Sea. There remained not one locust in all the territory of Egypt, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the children of Israel go. So, it's very interesting. I'm going to take a pause here for a second.